Today, we're diving into a lost technology that really challenges our whole idea of what writing even is. We're going to unravel a story about a tragic misunderstanding, a silent object, and an incredible code made of knots that just might rewrite a huge chunk of history.
All right, so our story kicks off with this one single moment, a fateful encounter that has been completely and tragically misunderstood for almost 500 years.
So picture this. It's November 16th, 1532. We're high in the Andes in the Grand Plaza of Cajamarca. The air is just thick with tension. You've got Spanish conquistadors hiding in the buildings, and the Inca Emperor himself, Atahualpa, has just rolled in on a golden litter surrounded by thousands of his warriors.
Then, walking right into the middle of this tense scene is a Spanish friar, a guy named Vicente de Valverde. He goes right up to the emperor, Atahualpa, and holds out this small object. It's a prayer book. And through a translator, he tells the emperor, this book holds the word of God.
Now you got to put yourself in Atahualpa's shoes. He's never seen a book before. In his world, sacred things, they're called huacas, were alive. They spoke to priests. They gave prophecies. So he does the only thing that makes sense to him. He holds the book up to his ear and he listens. But of course, the book says nothing. To him, it's just a dead thing, no spirit at all. So he just tosses it on the ground.
And that's the trigger. That's the exact moment a cultural misunderstanding sparks a complete massacre. The friar just screams this command, and within 2 hours, 7,000 Inca are dead, and their entire empire is teetering on the edge of collapse.
You know, for centuries, this story was told as proof that the Inca were primitive because they didn't get what a book was. It was painted as this act of pure ignorance, a way to justify the whole conquest. But that version of the story completely misses the real point.
See, here's the thing. This wasn't about ignorance versus enlightenment. No way. This was a clash between two incredibly sophisticated but just profoundly different information technologies. The Inca didn't need that book to speak, because they already had a technology that did.
And that brings us to the Inca's own information system. And honestly, this is where the story gets absolutely fascinating.
So meet the khipu. To the Spanish, it probably looked like a bunch of colorful, tangled strings. But this was no decoration. The khipu was a three-dimensional database. It was an information system made of knotted strings that was literally designed to be read by touch just as much as by sight.
Just think about that for a second. The Spanish had ink on parchment, which, let's be honest, is super vulnerable to the humidity in the jungle. Meanwhile, the Inca had these durable, portable, and basically encrypted strings that could survive for centuries in the Andes, all while encoding massive amounts of data.
And here's the part that will absolutely blow your mind. Modern researchers have figured out that the khipu works like a sophisticated binary code. At every step of making one, the khipu maker had to make a simple either-or choice. Was the string spun clockwise or counterclockwise? Was it not tied to the left or the right? Each one of those choices encoded a single bit of information, a 1 or a 0, just like the code that's powering the device you're watching this on right now.
So what does that all add up to? Well, with just 7 of these binary choices, the Inca could create 1,536 unique characters. That is more than double the characters in the ancient Sumerian writing system, and more than enough for a full-blown language capable of recording not just numbers, but stories, histories, and laws.
So if this system was so brilliant, why haven't most of us even heard of it? Well, that question leads us to the really tragic part of this story. The systematic, deliberate destruction of this incredible technology. You know, for the first 50 years or so after the conquest, the Spanish actually used the khipus. They kind of had to. It was the only way they could figure out how big the empire was or where all the gold was stored. But by 1583, the Catholic Church had this chilling realization. They figured out that as long as the Inca had their own records, they would always have their own history, their own culture, and, most importantly to the Church, their own religion.
And so, the Third Council of Lima issued one of the most destructive orders in human history. The khipus were officially declared instruments of the devil, and the command was given, burn them all. To control the future of the Inca, the Spanish knew they had to literally erase their past.
This wasn't just burning books. There's a word for this, and it's a heavy one: epistemicide. It means the murder of an entire system of knowledge. A deliberate, calculated act to completely wipe out a civilization's way of knowing, of remembering, and of recording its own story.
The sheer scale of what was lost is
It's almost impossible to wrap your head around. Imagine if, today, someone managed to erase every single hard drive on planet Earth. That is the level of devastation we are talking about. Centuries of Andean history, science, poetry, culture, just gone, turned to ash.
But believe it or not, the story doesn't end there, in fire and ash. Because even when faced with total destruction, knowledge has a funny way of surviving. So let's look at the final and most hopeful chapter. It's a simple truth. You can't burn everything. Some quipus were saved. They were hidden away by their keepers in tombs and in sacred caves. Others were carried to remote mountain villages and guarded for centuries as holy relics, passed down from one generation to the next, with their secrets just waiting to be rediscovered.
And that really brings us to our final thought here. The story of the Khipu is this incredibly powerful reminder that our version of history is so often dangerously incomplete, written by whoever won the war. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it, how many other ways of seeing the world, of recording knowledge, have been lost to time and conquest? What other silent codes are still out there, just waiting for us to finally learn how to listen?